Okay, I start. Friends, we are moving into understanding the international human rights mechanism. Now, it's a complicated system. Very complicated because some of you may even ask, why all this, sir? We are not able to understand the local. Where do we go for the international? And therefore, it is important for us to understand what there is for us in the international human rights mechanism. We had looked at our Protection of Human Rights Act. We had looked at the definition of human rights under that act. We had come to know that it was right to life, right to liberty, right to equality, and right to dignity of the individual. We had then moved on to understand how different rights are human rights when they affect women, when they affect children, when they affect Adivasis, when it affects persons with disabilities, when it affects transgender persons, etc., etc. And then we are trying to understand right to food, right to education, right to housing, freedom of expression, and right to information. And all this falls within our right to life, equality, liberty, and dignity. This was our model 1. We saw the principles, we saw the classifications. That was model 1. We went on to understand what is access to justice and how access to justice in India is through a variety of institutions. And we were introduced to courts, we were introduced to the legal aid, and we were introduced to the national and state human rights institutions. And then we also had a glimpse of what the global national human rights institutions seen is till yesterday. Now, today we start module 3 into the international human rights system. So from local to the national human rights institutions and now to the international. First question is, what is in this for us? What does this international system have for us? The international system increases protection in obtaining redress or some measures of justice for victims. And as we go deeper into the day, you will see all that. I will allow only clarification sessions today. Only clarifications. Because you're going to, after this, have 2 sessions, which is expanding this. And therefore, mostly all the expansions will be done there. Clarifications alone will be done here. This is a system where our local priorities, our local issues, our local issue in POSCO, in Odisha, in Sterlite, in Tamil Nadu, can be raised to the international level. And we can obtain an international stamping, an international endorsement for better human rights compliance on the ground. And this is also helping us shape our organizational priorities and strategies. This is very important, and that is why the international system is important for us. Now, let us be very clear. If the international system was very good, my participants from Jaffna who registered would have attended the program. But they are absentees. We have lots of absentee landlords here. I'm going to handle them also today. I want to agree in the beginning, the international human rights system is not fully function and does not deliver always. It's a defective system in a way, for various reasons. But it still can deliver some little positive results if we are creative and we know how to use it and use it strategically. That is what is important. So I am not saying the international is everything. Forget everything in the country. Participants, please note. This is very important to note. Don't think we are saying the international is greater, is higher, Forget everything below. Everything below is more important than the international. But the international can still be giving you some results positively if you know how to use it and if you use it strategically. Now, there are two systems. In the international human rights mechanism, there are two systems. One known as the charter-based system and the other the treaty-based system. It will be doing good for all of you to take notes as I speak. I am a teacher. I am a teacher and I believe in teaching. And when I teach, I ensure people take notes. And if they do not, the loss is theirs. Please take notes. Even if you are a professor, take notes. This is what you tell in school or in college or in law school. If you don't take notes today, the loss is yours. I repeat. Don't think the slides are there, you can see the slides. The internalization takes place when you take notes. So the charter-based system is based on the UN Charter and covers all the member states of the country, of the globe, of the United Nations. And the treaty-based is based on human rights treaties. So charter-based, treaty-based, two types. We are now going first into the charter-based. Then I will come into the treaty-based, and then we'll finish. Friends, don't forget, some of these in the charter-based and the entire treaty-based. The treaty-based will be once again done in the afternoon. But if you have a grounding now, you can understand what is being said in the afternoon. If you have an understanding now, then you will understand better what will be told tomorrow morning in the special procedures session, both of which are handled by Professor Stephen Marks of the Harvard University. Now, the Human Rights Council, the special procedures of the Human Rights Council, and the Universal Periodic Review, note it down, UPR, Universal Periodic Review. These three fall into the charter-based system. We will first deal with two here and the third at the end of the session. I want to be sure of time and therefore, now this is the entrance to the United Nations. But you and I cannot enter through this. You and I, when we go, we are NGOs or we are visitors. So we will have another entrance. But when we come back, if you are guided properly, you can enter back here. And it looks very grand to enter into a place where all the flags are kept. Now there are more flags. This is an old thing. Now this passage is not used. There's lots of flags in this place as well. Now, friends, here is the Human Rights Council, which is elected and comprises 47 states. It's the main UN body addressing human rights matters. So when we are going to Geneva, the Council, etc., it is this Human Rights Council. And you will see how often it meets. Under this Human Rights Council, you will see in blue, the Universal Periodic Review. The Universal Periodic Review. Here. The special procedures, which is here, and the other mechanisms. And the secretariat for this is here in Geneva, where? At the office of the UN High Commission for Human Rights. They serve as the secretariat for the Human Rights Council, but the Human Rights Council meets in the building that you saw earlier, in this building, which is a massive building. It's a massive building. Who participates in the Human Rights Council? Governments participate. National Human Rights Commissions participate. Yesterday you heard Rosalind Nolan telling us that. We have non-governmental organizations that participate. And we have specialized agencies of the UN like the UNDP, the WHO, the ILO, UNHCR, etc., which also participate. So these are all the participants who participate. And of course, there is the media, who's also there, covering, as they cover, all incidents globally. What is the Human Rights Council? The Human Rights Council is a political body because it is an organ of the General Assembly. Established in the year 2006 Earlier, we had the Commission on Human Rights. That has been changed into the Human Rights Council with a new few additions that were brought in. 47 members comprising elected, eligible for 2 consecutive terms, gross violators of human rights in the Human Rights Council can technically be removed by 2/3 majority. Technically. That's all. Very difficult otherwise. How is this membership? The membership is not always in one country, in one continent. You have 13 members elected from Africa, 13 members elected from Asia, 6 from Eastern Europe, 8 from GRULAC, which is the Latin American countries, and the Western Europe and other nations other group is the 7 countries, totally 47 countries. Therefore, if you want a resolution to be passed about India or about Sri Lanka, we belong to Asia, we will get only 13 votes and everybody in Asia votes. What you have to do is to ensure that the global community is convinced. This global community has to be convinced for a success in a resolution that you are passing. Very important to understand this. What are its functions? The Human Rights Council? To discuss human rights issues, to address issues of violations of human rights that are happening globally, including gross and systematic violations. Now, whether it is being done effectively, who is blocking this? These are important questions. And set new standards. It is not, human rights is not static, it is dynamic. And therefore, newer and newer and newer and newer standards are set. The standard setting process takes place in the Human Rights Council. And it does a universal periodic review of all states. So a lot of human rights work related to the globe takes place in this body called the Human Rights Council. It has 3 meetings a year now. And the 3 meetings can totally at least minimum 10 weeks. This is the first year in March this year, or April this year, that the meeting of the Human Rights Council had to be abandoned midway. And they'll have to make it. I was supposed to be there in end of, I think it was, end of March. Luckily, I didn't get stuck there. Otherwise, I would have remained there and had to live in Geneva, which is a very, very difficult place to live in and very costly place to live in, very boring place to live in after some time, if it was not for the cancellation of the meeting that I had to attend earlier elsewhere, which brought me there. So 10 weeks, 3 meetings, 10 weeks. When? March, June, September. Usually 4 weeks in March, 3 weeks in June, and 3 weeks in September. Slight changes can be there, but 3 meetings a year. Some agendas are brought in March, some are brought in June, some are brought in September. Friends, I'm taking the trouble of telling you all this because these meetings, you don't need to be in Geneva henceforth. You can watch all the meetings at their timings on the webcast as it is happening in the UN. The entire process is webcast. Sometimes I've heard meetings where there were speakers making oral statements on what was happening in Tamil Nadu. So it is something that you can easily do. I will try to see whether I have time at the end to take you there. So 3 meetings a year. That's what we need to know at the moment. Who are these people who participate? The General Assembly Reserve Forward, they are in practice. The NGOs participate. Where do the NGOs get their recognition? They get it from the Economic Social Council. I told you, remember IDSN, 10 years waiting for participation, for accreditation. NHRI's accreditation, yesterday they were told, they were telling you, both I think Karen and Gerard, how difficult it is, and rightly so, to get accreditation. Matthew told you how easy it was for India to get accreditation. That's a big story. Very big story. The one on the accreditation committee was also the chairman of the Filipino committee. A very nice person, but that was his first time that he was serving on that accreditation committee. Anyhow, and UN specialized agencies. These are the non-state participants who participate in the UN. So I can participate in the UN. I'm not a state, but I can participate. Matthew can participate. You can participate. A Lady Law College professor can participate. A law professor from TIS can participate. How do you enter? If you are able to get an invitation from an organization which is accredited to the UN already, which has ECOSOC status as this, that organization can invite you as its representative. So People's Watch is a member of Forum Asia. He's a member of the World Organization Against Torture. He's a member of Civicus. And therefore, as a member of such organizations and other organizations, we can easily get ourselves into the meeting for carrying out some very definite resolution, agenda item, etc. Now in India, we have participants from Orissa. There is an accredited organization in Orissa. For those of you who are Orissa and you know Dhirendra Pandaji, a very respectable NGO leader from Orissa, grassroots NGO leader from Orissa. His organization, the CSNR, has a UN accreditation and the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. You saw Venkat here, you saw Devika here, and you will see Mr. Sanjay, their international director. You saw Maya Darwala, the founding executive director. All of them belong to the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, which is an international NGO accredited by Economic and Social Council. I hope it's clear. So other than states, there are participants in the Human Rights Council. What the roles of NGOs and national human rights institutions? We have direct access to the Human Rights Council and its mechanisms by attending a meeting. We can give written submissions. Unlimited number. Now the session is in June. There is a deadline that will be set, and I think it is already set. And any amount of written submissions can be provided by any of the accredited NGOs on what is happening in their country. Now, friends, let us take a break for a minute and look at what's happening in the country today. You all saw that this Supreme Court of India had allowed to pass in front of the court various comments about NGOs raising issues through public interest litigations. This happened in the month. We were called sellout shops, self-employment public interest litigations. I mean, the worst that could be said. I have mentioned this in some public utterances and condemned them. And immediately, because I was so strong in my condemnation, somebody said it is communal and YouTube removed it. What can there be communal when I talk about my Supreme Court? And I said what is there. Senior advocates have written articles. Friends, a good lesson for each one of us because of the pressure that was put on the Supreme Court, pointing out to the Supreme Court its failure in rising up to the occasion, in upholding, as I always show you, upholding nothing but the book. Yesterday, after dismissing all the writ petitions that were filed on behalf of migrant workers, yesterday the Supreme Court has suo moto taken up the cause and now directs, and the directions are quite interesting. Finally, Supreme Court steps in to address distress among migrants. And they say, transport should be organized, accommodation should be organized. Friends, one more proof to you and me, and to me also. Don't think I preach, I learn every day. And today I'm learning that the more I put pressure on the system will definitely have to deliver, because we are working within the parameters of law. We are not working with guns in our hands. We are not working with swords in our hands. We are working with law in our hands and legal systems in our hands. And therefore, there is a role for national human rights institutions and NGOs. And submitting written submissions there will expose people here, and they will start responding. When they respond, they will be harsh. They will not always be kind, but they will respond. And that response is important. We are all people of different faith. We all believe in our different faith that we have to pay the price for standing for truth. We pray on a Friday, we pray on a Sunday, we pray on different days, we pray every day. But everyday prayer is to uphold in whatever religion we belong to, truth. And that truth should be able to overcome the powers that be. And that we have been able to do in the Supreme Court today. So these written submissions are for that in the Human Rights Council. But you should make it well, you should make it true, you should make it accurate. Oral statements are also possible. You can take the floor. You can speak for one person. You can speak for several organizations together. But you have to be accredited to enter those places. You can organize side events. What is a side event? A side event is a side event. It is not the main event. The main event takes place in the Human Rights Council. But to be able to influence people who are in the Human Rights Council, we are allowed to organize events where we invite people from the main event to come to our event, where we educate them on our cause. Friends, many of you, if you have a question on that, you ask a question and I'll come back on that. And then you lobby on resolutions to specific delegations, to a variety of people. Sometimes we lobby with the High Commissioner in the building. I remember I was part of a Dalit women delegation because I was part of the IDSN to meet the High Commissioner on Human Rights in the building. The previous High Commissioner, Navi Pita. And we met her and we talked to her and we pressurized with her. So it's important that NGOs are there to create the pressure. Otherwise, states are states. And states are, according to your knowledge by now, the majority violator. Companies are also, but states are the major violators by keeping quiet or handing over everything to companies, as our country is seeing today. So NGOs, when you are entering there, you should know that those are not angels sitting there. Definitely not angels. There may be one or two are angels. So it's up to us to identify who are the good states and lobby with them to put pressure on other states. That is our role of NGOs in the UN and the Human Rights Council. Now we will go to the special procedures. Friend, this special procedures is also repeated tomorrow in detail. So we will go very fast here. The overview is being seen. So what have we finished now? We have finished understanding that in the UN human rights mechanism, we have two types. One is treaty-based and the other is charter-based. We started with charter-based. Under charter-based, we finished what is Human Rights Council. We are going to special procedures. Any clarifications have come, Rajvel? Clarification, no questions, clarifications. Matthew, Rajvel?
Yes, just one. Right, so practical question. Our NGO was selected to attend these UN sessions.
Sorry, get me again. I want
our NGOs selected to attend these UN sessions.
Thank you. Good question. It's a clarification. NGOs are accredited. You saw this? They are accredited. There is an NGO committee that meets in New York. You have to apply to that. If you are a registered NGO from a country, you have to apply to that NGO committee. That NGO committee, after a process, gives you accreditation. I'm telling you like a story. That accreditation process only, I told you, the organization that I chair presently, the International Dalit Solidarity Network based in Copenhagen with members throughout Europe and throughout South Asia, for 10 long years does not have that accreditation. Because the government of India has been asking 98 questions whenever the committee sits. The same question sometimes repeated. Go to the website, take down please the one who asked this question, IDSN website, and find out all the 98 questions and all the answers that were given. And you will find the question will be repeated once again and again because there was nobody to challenge India there. I happened to be there in New York 2-3 years ago, and I met a number of countries who then said, no, we understand, sir. It's been wrong on our part. We will start questioning India, but that process has not started in a vehement manner by then. So accredited NGOs by the UN system will be allowed to participate. Now that accredited NGO is what I told you was Forum Asia. There are different organizations. There are hundreds of such organizations. But all these organizations have to continuously report back to the UN of what activities they take part, their source of funds, which countries they work with. And mind you, it's very tough. If you work on issues which are inimical to China, they will catch you up. They will ask you 2-3 questions. So I belong to Forum Asia, where we work with Taiwan, as I told you yesterday about Taiwan. And because we work with Taiwan, our Geneva representative said, please be careful, sir. China will now ask us questions when we submit our reports. So there are pressures everywhere. So we have to be careful. But at the same time, we have to be pushing our agenda through. One of the best organizations which works with the Human Rights Council is called the International Service for Human Rights. Please write. International, put it on the chat. International Service for Human Rights, and put their web also, Rajwin. International Service for Human Rights, one of the best organizations in terms of working with the Human Rights Council. Very, very updated. They have their people on the ground. Matthew attended a training program organized by the OHCHR some years ago. They kill you in the training program with the amount of work. But then you come back as an experienced human rights defender, able to use the system. So that is how NGOs are accredited. And if you are accredited NGO, your staff get longer periods of badges. And then you can, in turn, invite other people for your programs. You have about 20 invitations that you can offer in a particular session, because there's time, space, and physical space for restrictions, etc. That is the method. Any other questions? Clarifications?
Yeah, one more regarding accreditation process. Does it need government's approval or clearance?
Government's approval or clearance within the country doesn't matter. Doesn't need it. You don't need it. Now, let me give you an example. I think there are some, maybe there is somebody connected with the Don Bosco here. Is there somebody connected with the Don Bosco institutions here as a participant? Can you respond in the chat if you are there? Now, the Don Bosco fathers are an accredited organization, and therefore they participate in all the sessions and they raise issues. Our own friend, Father Palitanam from Para in Andhra Pradesh. Now, Andhra Pradesh. He is presently back in India because he got caught because of the corona. He is their official representative of the Salesians in New York. He is based in New York. So that's an example of people who get accredited and who are there. Was that the question asked? I thought I missed the actual question. Hello?
Yeah, it was.
That is the question. Okay. You can have universities that are also accredited. The state government, the government has nothing to do with it. Government has nothing to do. But if the government comes to know who you are, then they start putting these 95 questions in 10 years. You saw that. And that happened to other organizations. I'm not mentioning it because I don't want to expose those organizations to greater difficulties by mentioning their names here. But there are also other Indian organizations where the government is putting. But supposing your government is not on the committee, then you can escape. But they also oppose certain themes on which you work. So if you work on LGBT rights, there's some little greater scrutiny because they are very sensitive to this issue. And then you might have some specific states, and I don't want to mention which states. You will understand who states are. Yesterday you heard Malaysia is sensitive to LGBT issues, so you understand who the states are. They might come in and put some questions and try to make your entry difficult. That's it. Okay. With that, I'll just move forward to special procedures. Now, the special procedures of the Human Rights Council. These words, at least you should have correct knowledge. Special procedures. They cover all human rights. They cover civil, they cover political, they cover economic, social, and cultural rights. And the special procedures are a mechanism to examine, monitor, advise, and publicly report on human rights situation in specific countries, which are called country mandates. Note this, country mandates. or on specific human rights violations, and therefore they are called thematic mandates. So under special procedures, you have two types: country mandates, thematic mandates. Countries referring to countries which will look, the special procedures there will look after only that country. And on thematic mandate, they will cover only that mandate. The UN is known for confusing us with a number of terminologies. Don't get caught in that. The special procedures are called by different names. Sometimes they are called as special rapporteurs. Sometimes they are called independent experts. Sometimes they are called special representative of the UN Secretary General on a particular subject. It starts like that. Somewhere starts like that. Special representative of the UN Secretary General on housing. And then you have the formal mandate that is accepted, and then you get a special rapporteur on housing. Or sometimes it's called a working group. If it is a special rapporteur or an independent expert, it is a person. It is a working group, it's a team of 5 people. So some teams have teams, and some teams have persons. So you can have a working group or a special rapporteur. And if you have a group, then it is from all the regional groupings. They are appointed by the Human Rights Council and they serve in their personal capacities. I tell you, it's a very transparent process, which in India is not followed for our Women's Commission or Child Rights Commission or Human Rights Commission or any of our commissions. No, for us, we don't make it transparent because it will become problematic. But the special procedure selection process is definitely a transparent process. And you can open and find out who has applied. You can find out who has shortlisted. You can find their biodata. Then you can, among the shortlisted, who are being interviewed, and then who has been selected will be announced in the Human Rights Council. When the shortlisted 3 names go, then it's a political decision. They make it in the Human Rights Council. These are people of expertise, people experienced in the field of that particular mandate, independent, impartial. Personally, their integrity is good and they are known for their objectivity. One example is, you had Milun Kothari, whom you saw. He was a former special rapporteur. After that, he has never been a special rapporteur, but he served 2 terms. Known for his expertise. What was his expertise? He used to work with Habitat. And he was engaged with the Housing and Land Rights Network here. So he had expertise in the field of housing rights, locally and globally. And because of this expertise and the personality and the fact that he is independent, people knew that he was impartial, he had personal integrity, etc. He was selected. Now I told you, the housing rights thing is taken over by Balakrishnan, if I'm right. He is a Tamil, but the US citizen. I think I referred to him. He was here during the tsunami. He has worked with the government of Tamil Nadu, trying to make them understand what housing rights are. Our friend Shivani works very closely with the housing rights special rapporteur. Now he, in addition to being a college professor, has lots of work through his university done on these subjects. But university subjects are not research subjects where you close yourself to your university, where you open yourself to what is happening on the ground. You do lots of research. You have research students who are doing this work and doing critical human rights work, not jalra work. Critical. That is important. Then you will get it. Like, sometimes there can be 1 or 2 mistakes in the system. I don't want to say mistakes don't take place. But today the trend largely is they have moved from practitioners to academics. Practitioners to academics. And I give you one example. special rapporteur on freedom of association and assembly we had for 6 long years was my friend Mainaki. I wanted to bring him to meet all of you. Not been possible. All my friends cannot be brought here. That's overall. Time zones, lots of difficulties. Then calling them for 15 minutes they'll murder me for that. He is a lawyer. He was the chair of the commission in Kenya. He got selected for this new mandate on freedom of association and assembly. Now, he was somebody who believed in associating and assembling. He is not one who teaches right assembly and right association in a classroom and says, all of you meet. He is one who meets on the road. He protests. He gets arrested. He has FIRs against him. He asked me, Henri, can you find out how I can send 2 of my women from Kenya to the POSCO. It's so confusing, and this POSCO struggle in Orissa. I said, Mahina, please don't send anybody there. Because if they go there, they might see people and might be able to learn. But those who are organizing there, after that, will have a lot of political problem because they will say Kenya is behind the organizing of people, providing support, providing financial support, etc. Then he said, Henri, but I see this wonderful movement in Kudangulam, where I understand 25,000 women are protesting for over 600 days continuously. I said, please keep far away from Kudangulam. Don't even talk about Kudangulam when you're in Sri Lanka because that is closer. So he said, what? I said, even now they are saying that the leader of the movement, Mr. Uday Kumar, was set up by foreign funds when our bank account was closed, my dear friends. The public rumor that was spread by none other than my good friend P. Chidambaram and company. They were then in government. I love Chidambaram. That's a different question. But this is what he did to us. Our bank account was closed, not for this. And the public statement was, he is meddling in Kudangulam. I had nothing to do with Kudangulam. I went there only once. And that is on the 11th of September, not 11th, 14th of September of the year the struggle started. I didn't go on the 11th because 11th there was a killing of Dalits in Paramakudi, which I was involved in. And why did I go there? I went there because I heard that 200 persons were doing a fast unto death and some of them were fainting. So I wanted to warn them. I said, please, we don't want deaths. You do your fast, but be careful. I went there for that, to see whether I could help them withdraw them. When I went there, I found that I was a fool. The people had lots of wisdom. There were 200 people on a stage who were sitting. Of course, there were drip bottles and all that. But there were also 20,000 women gathered there who were also fasting. I said, Mr. Henri, get back. You are the one who's ill-advised. They are well-advised. I told him, this is what I did. Is that wrong? Going to a place where people are protesting and when they are in danger, that was not wrong. And they did it. I accepted I did it. But I didn't do anything more. Don't say Henri organized. I've got no moral right to talk about their struggle, which was theirs. Their own struggle. So because of that, this was the story spread. The story was what was told yesterday by Matthew. The accreditation of the Indian NHRC was challenged by us in 2011. You remember Matthew's statement? He had to hurry through that. First time questions were asked. They got an A status. Questions were asked. You remember Rosalind Noonan said there were people who went to the court in Switzerland. That was Justice Balakrishnan's commission. I tell you now, and if I'm wrong, Mr. Parashar will correct me. He's sitting in the audience. These are embarrassing. The UN Special Rapporteur, we are talking about them, on human rights defenders came to India, 2011, January 10th to 21. And she raised questions, and she raised a very good report, which was embarrassing to the government of India. These were the 2 reasons my FCRA was withdrawn. It took them 6 or 7 years to state this in writing in the High Court in Delhi where I filed a case. So this is how these mandate holders are. And so this mandate holder, Mainakya, He's a practitioner. And he really had solid support from civil society and, of course, a number of governments. So practitioners are selected. Now, academic, it is not that every academic is bad. There are very good academics. There are very good academics who have held the position of special rapporteurs on extrajudicial killings, on torture. These are all pakka academics. On food, very good academics. So this is not to speak against academics, but the trend is they think academics can be quietened. And there are many who can be quietened. And there was. After Mainakya, there was a lady from Italy who was a professor. And then, of course, after 4 months, she knew this was not her cup of tea. I appreciate her. She withdrew. So that is how they are selected and appointed. Now, we have today 56 mandates in all. 47 of them are thematic, 12 are country mandates. And with the working groups, there are totally 80 mandate holders, for whom the Office of the High Commission serves as a secretariat to provide personnel. So they have their assistants there, logical support, research assistant. They are not paid. They are experts. They are not paid. Their costs alone are paid. Now you will see a whole list. I will not go through this list now. I will go fast, but just to show a working group. This working group is on the people of African descent. You have one person from different region. So you see all, you can see they represent different regions. Working group on arbitrary detention, different people. Working group on human rights and transnational corporations and other business enterprises, different persons. Where you have Surya Dev, who is from India, now based in Hong Kong. Based in Hong Kong, he teaches in Hong Kong, Indian. Working group on enforced or involuntary disappearances. Working group on use of mercenaries and as a means of violating human rights. Working group on discrimination against women and girls. See the subjects. And now you come to independent experts. Independent experts on the enjoyment of human rights of persons with albinism, on cultural rights, on persons with disabilities, on right to education, on safe, clean, healthy and sustainable development, on summary executions, on right to food, and you can go on and on and on and on. My friend Clement on the right to freedom of assembly and association. You can go on. This person has changed, Michael Foss has changed, and we have now Mary Lawler from Frontline Defenders. So independence of judges, indigenous people, you can go through. Another friend of ours, Cecilia, on internet, she's changed. This person has changed also. Just recently, all of them have changed in March. Just to give you an idea of who these people are. Privacy, these are the topics. How do they work? They interact daily with what is happening. Friends, we send our petitions on human rights violations that are taking place on a regular basis. You will find a colleague who will come here, Mr. Kirti Roy from West Bengal. I think he will be here on 29th or so. He sends daily matters from West Bengal on cases of torture, extrajudicial killings, etc., etc. So there are communications that are sent, and that's why they interact daily. They act upon human rights concerns either in individual cases or general issues, both sides. They undertake fact-finding missions to countries. They prepare thematic studies. They raise public awareness through the media within their mandates. I'm going fast because we will deal. So they do press releases, they do communication, they do country visits, they do thematic studies, and they report to the Human Rights Council. Now the 60 mandate holders report on 44 themes and about 12 countries to the Human Rights Council. This is how the Human Rights Council gets official information. You got it? That is how they get official information. From where do these human rights special rapporteurs get it? They get it from civil society. They get it from media. They verify facts. So if a matter gets into their report, then it has serious proportions. And that is how new standards are later developed by them. So communications are complaints. So they take action on individual cases. They sometimes do joint work. They send urgent appeals on matters relating to countries. They do visits to countries. We will have references tomorrow of how they visited. I told you the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders came to India January 10th to January 21. I did accompany her. My colleagues in Bhubaneswar, my colleagues in Guwahati, my colleagues in Kolkata, my colleagues in Gujarat, in Jammu and Kashmir know that I traveled with her. But I had nothing to do with her officially. She was on an official country visit. Man, they told her send a letter to the government requesting a visit. So government invites them, and some governments give them standing invitations. Now we are belonging to the second category. We are given standing invitations to everybody, but we don't specifically tell them when to come. So for several years, we don't have special rapporteurs who visited India. The special rapporteurs cannot enter a country without an official invitation for an official visit. They can come. Supposing Jindal University invites them to give a lecture on some subjects, they can definitely come if they are given a visa by the government. But they cannot come for an official visit. They can come. Those are called academic visits. These are official visits. But if you can bring them for an academic visit, that itself will open their eyes to what is going on. I tried Mainakya when he was here to come here. I got invitation from the National Law University, Delhi for him. Our government said, Mainakya, no chance. And Mainakya, when he was refused invitation, said, my goodness, this is the country which I thought was the most democratic country in the world. Now I understand I must come here, but he could never thereafter come here. So we got him not into India, we got him to Kathmandu. And there were two people who were prevented from going to Kathmandu. The big number had to be brought small. And I remember walking with Mr. Uday Kumar and another trade unionist from the anti-POXO struggle in the elderly gentleman. I think Pradipta and Dani will be unmuted and tell me their names. That elderly gentleman who led the POXO struggle. Can you unmute yourselves and tell me, Dani or Pradipta?
Prashant Paikare.
Prashant Paikare. Thank you for that. Prashant Paikare was there. Not Prashant Paikare, the other man.
Abhay Sahu.
Abhay Sahu. He was there. And both Uday Kumar and they were just coming up. I knew there would be problems, so I told them, you come after me. Because I thought if they stop me, then you stop them, we will all be together. But all those who crossed the immigration, we said, please get out and go to the gate. And the moment the gate opens, enter the aircraft. I crossed. So I went and I was standing at a distance and watching. Abhay Sahu was stopped and Uday Kumar was stopped. And they both were prevented. Okay, it became an issue. That's a different question. But then the government told them, please, I know we can only stop you in this by boarding the flight, but I know you can walk through the borders very easily. You can cross the borders and go, and nothing can prevent you unless we keep a gunman following you. We request you not to go. So they said, we will not go. They didn't go. Medha Patkar also said, I will never be allowed, so don't want to go. But these three people had a 2-hour, like this, video conferencing facility with Mainakya when he was in Kathmandu. So there are some countries which prevent mandate holders even coming for academic visits. But then there are ways of which we can communicate and ensure news goes. They do country visits. Whom do they meet? They meet national authorities. They meet representatives of civil society, victims of violations. When the extrajudicial inquiry person came, he came to Trivandrum. South African professor who is now in the Human Rights Committee. I'll get his name. He came to Trivandrum. And Arpudammal, for those of you who know who Arpudammal is in Tamil Nadu, who is the mother of Perry, who was on the death row for many years, and then in the Rajiv Gandhi case is still in prison. He has just received parole twice, but he has never been released. His mother came and deposed, together with other victims of the Margaret is here of the STF violence. And I remember Arpudammal coming to me and saying, Tambi, eppadiyavathu and the no to death penalty, abolish death penalty, pinna our court la na podalama. I'm saying it in Tamil because that was her language. Can I, Tambi, younger brother, can I go up to him, this special rapporteur, and pin on his coat the badge, no to death penalty? I said, please go and do. He would like it. And when she did it, he said, I'm proud you did it, mother. I don't know whether because of my report, your son will be out of death penalty. My dear friends, it was that report which also had an influence on the Chief Justice of India, the then Chief Justice of India from Tamil Nadu, who then became the governor of Kerala later, no mentioning names, who then said incarceration for many years on the death row is not right, and therefore he was removed from the death row. Friends, here is a case of a mother who was produced by civil society before the special rapporteur, inside the country, not in her state, in another state. And her dream for him to be removed from the death row became a reality because of the strength of that report. And that report was used in court to argue. I think these are signs of hope. It's a very moving story for me. The mother, the son are all before me. We fought and got the son a parole recently for the wedding of his niece or nephew. I went there with my wife. It was in Krishnagiri. Police were present because he was on parole. There were heavy police. As I was entering, the police started taking photographs of me. I went and caught them. I said, what the hell are you doing? I've got dignity. I'm coming for a wedding. You're taking photographs of me? You want me to talk to your DGP now? Fellows ran away. But those who were inside were very polite. They allowed the mother to drum the parai, the Dalit drum. And then they invited Perry also to come and drum. They are also human beings with all aspirations. The campaign against death penalty is spreading day in and day out through such special rapporteurs who make country visits. They do thematic studies on various subjects. They report once again to the Human Rights Council. They prepare annual reports. I will be dealing with it tomorrow. I mean, you will hear about it tomorrow in detail. Or sometimes the Human Rights Council asks them to study on a special subject. And we will also give you examples tomorrow of what is special. Just as the special rapporteur, just as the Human Rights Council, through the special rapporteurs, get various reports, these special rapporteurs also contribute through their annual reports, sometimes to the Human Rights Council and sometimes to the General Assembly. They issue press releases. So these are special rapporteurs. Are there any questions on this? I think I'm well within time. On special rapporteurs. Sorry, sir, I didn't hear you.
No questions, sir.
No questions. Tomorrow we will see. Now, friends, we go to the second batch of mechanisms. In the first batch, I finished Human Rights Council. I finished special rapporteurs' introduction. Tomorrow you will go into it in detail. And 3, you have the Universal Periodic Review, which I'll do a little later. We'll go to treaty-based mechanisms. Now, so far, in the Human Rights Council and in the human special procedures, these relate to a variety of themes. And we are not bothered whether your country has signed or not signed on a particular subject or not. If the violation takes place in your country, that can be raised there. Here, these are treaties. They are known as covenants sometimes, they are known as conventions sometimes, they are known as treaty sometimes. All of them mean the same. I concede to this and both of us sign a contract. My country signs a treaty that I will uphold all these articles in my country and change the laws of my country accordingly. Don't get confused by the words treaty, conventions, covenants. They mean the same. There are nine such treaties in our event system. And they are monitored by a treaty body committee or a treaty body monitoring committee, where also there are experts who are more or less the same like our special procedures. Sometimes they are here, sometimes they are there. But then they have a term and they have a duty to perform. They have a term and they have a duty to perform. And they are nominated thereafter. What are the treaties? You have the third, which is on racial discrimination of 1965. You have the Civil and Political Rights of 66, Socio-Economic Cultural Rights Convention of 66, the CEDAW of 1979, the CAT, Convention Against Torture, that is CAT. When we use this word, you must be wondering, where is this CAT coming? Of 1984, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, you remember it was referred to, of 1989, the Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families, 1990. We can draw a lot from this in terms of principles when we are dealing with migrants in our own country, but these are migrants from different countries. Persons with Disabilities, 2006. So these are the conventions that are being monitored, and the committees that monitor are known as the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Committee on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. The Human Rights Committee looks after the ICCPR, the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination for CEDAW, the Committee Against Torture on CAT, the Committee on Rights of the Child on CRC, the Committee on Migrant Workers on the International Convention on Protection of Rights of All Migrant Workers and Their Families, and the Subcommittee on Prevention of Torture, which is an option protocol to the CAT committee, the Committee on Persons with Disabilities, Committee on Enforced Disappearance. All of them meet in Geneva, and they are supported by the Human Rights Division established in the Office of the High Commission, also in Geneva. So these are treaty bodies. Now, under treaty bodies, which you will be seeing in detail this afternoon, you have this terminology called general comments. Write this down, general comments. And ask Professor Steve Marks today, what is the general comment? He will explain. A general comment explains a portion of the treaty. The treaty cannot be changed. So there is a general comment on forced evictions. There is a general comment on forced eviction which comes out of the ICCPR. The ICCPR. The committee, this committee, has a general comment on forced evictions because it speaks about housing. And people said, but housing is not the problem. People are being forced to be evicted. So on forced eviction, there was a general comment which says what exactly the governments should do when evictions have to take place and how it has to be done and what is the notice and all that. General comment on eviction. General comment on water. There's a general comment on water, also by the same committee. So there are hundreds of general comments expanding the meaning of some of the words which are in these treaties to make it adapted to that day's situation. This afternoon you will hear more about general comments, and there are concluding observations. So these treaties are there. These treaties, the governments have to report to these treaty bodies. Once we report, and I'll give you an example. When I tell you a small story, it takes 3 minutes. This Mr. Ravi Nair, who came on the first day and told you history, in the year 1997, his South Asian Human Rights Documentation Center came out with a report to the Committee of CERD, which was on racial discrimination. And he looked at the definition of CERD, of racial discrimination, and he submitted a report when the government of India was submitting its report. The government of India was very proud of CERD because it was racial discrimination. So they were very proud of their contribution of what they had done in South Africa. And they didn't know that this little man from India, a very powerful activist, I told you, in his report, about 48, 50 pages, had expanded the meaning of racial discrimination and said if racial discrimination is understood properly, unfortunately, racial discrimination doesn't amount to caste, but the way you have defined it in Article 2 of CERD will only allow you to come to the conclusion the matters relating to caste discrimination in India fall within the definition of racial discrimination. Tomorrow when I do my session, I will take 5 minutes on that to explain that to you, because I didn't bring that story. And he gave this alternative report. So here was the CERD committee which was evaluating India's report, but also had an alternative report, another report from civil society. And you educate the team members, no? So the team members all know about it. So on the basis of this alternative report, the CERD committee asked the government of India, what have you to say? And they said, no, racial discrimination and caste discrimination are different things. They said, yes, it is different. But here is a gentleman who has brought it within the ambit. And they gave what is called, at the end, a concluding observation. Every treaty body, at the end of their session, after reviewing the country report, comes out with a concluding observation. And the concluding observations also have findings and recommendations. And the finding was, henceforth, all matters relating to caste discrimination in India, because they fall within the definition of racial discrimination as defined in the Convention for Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Government of India will have to report about how they have done, what they have done to progress the abolition of caste discrimination in India. Friends, the government in its report, and I will make sure that report is also made available to you all, said, we have named so-and-so road after Nelson Mandela in this state, in that country, in that city, etc. But the committee was not bothered what you did to Mandela. The committee was not bothered about what you did on racial discrimination. The committee was bothered about racial discrimination in the Indian context, which they found in the definition falls within. And that is the first door, my dear friends, that Ravi Nair and the South Asian Human Rights Documentation Center opened for issues of caste discrimination to enter the portals of the United Nations through one of the treaties. Then CRC followed. Then ICCPR followed with the Human Rights Committee. Then CEDAW followed with the CEDAW Committee. Then CRC followed, and all the other doors were opened. Then special rapporteurs also opened. Please go to the IDSN website once again. And look at all the openings that have been made in the Human Rights Council through special procedures and treaty bodies. All those openings were made because Mr. Ravi Nair and the South Asian Human Rights Documentation Center opened the doors through these concluding observations. I had the privilege of translating that into Tamil several years ago. So we have a role to play as NGOs in treaty bodies, in opening these doors, in providing these alternative reports. And sometimes, because we do some difficult things, There is intimidation on us. There is intimidation on us. There are reprisals against us. And these are also taken up by the United Nations. My closing of my bank account for 2,000 days, friends, is a reprisal. And very clearly the government of India says, because he communicates with these special procedures, he communicates with the embassies. My dear friends, I told them back, if this is a mistake you think I did, then I will only confess to you that I will carry on with this mistake. I will carry on with this mistake for a long time to come. Okay. Any questions here?
No, no questions.
That's okay. Friends, the last part, I'll go very fast, is on the Universal Periodic Review, which is what we refer to as UPR there. The Universal Periodic Review, I will also deal tomorrow in detail. It is a different type of a mechanism. This is a peer mechanism. So the state parties themselves monitor the performance of states. So you saw in the treaty bodies, experts look at it. You throw in special rapporteurs, experts look at it. These state bodies, the governments were very upset. Who are these experts? We are running the government. EPS and OPS, EPS and OPS say, oh, this people's watch. What do they know? We are running the government. So they said, okay, we now governments will monitor. So we said, okay. So Universal Periodic Review came. The Universal Periodic Review is a process like this, where the country prepares a report on its own saying this is what the human rights in our country is. NGOs in that country join together and prepare their own report, which is also made public. And then there is what you call a review that is made in the Human Rights Council, where countries participate and ask questions to the country that is being reviewed. And then you have an outcome plenary. And here the outcome plenary are in the form of recommendations. And you have time to follow the recommendations for 3 years. And after 4 years, once again, the UPR process starts. So India has finished 1, 2, and the third UPR process. Yesterday, they were asking us about NHRC, whether their matters come. Yes, it comes. So this is the UPR. We will be going into it in detail tomorrow. I will handle it again with that. So here I show you government's report, stakeholders, NGOs, and the National Human Rights Institutions report. And then there is the UN compilation, the UNICEF, the UNDP, the WHO, the ILO. They form a report. All these reports are the basis on which the countries then ask that particular country which is being reviewed on a periodic basis questions. So the system in the UN is ultimately a monitoring of human rights. And the Human Rights Council, through special procedures, through experts, in the treaty bodies on the treaty alone, which our countries have respectively ratified. And then through the UPR, which is also a charter-based mechanism, the states themselves monitor. Friends, I will stop here.